My name is Saley Davis, and I will be discussing my literature review concerning the benefits and risks of virtual worlds online for use in education in K through 12. What you see here is called Dream World. It's actually a hypergrid-enabled application where you can create your own virtual world and host it on your own private server, or connect it to the hypergrid, which is essentially allowing other people to access the world through the internet.
This presentation is to discuss the benefits and risks for educators when using online virtual worlds with youth. Various online virtual world platforms are explored for applications of educational games and simulations for K-12 learning. SecondLife.com, Kitely.com, and OS Grid as examples. Other services exist that allow access to the hypergrid, which includes private servers all over the globe. Programs also exist such as Dreamworld and Sim on a Stick, which allow for virtual world creation and use offline or on private servers. Prior research is examined to determine the potential benefits and risks and identify where more research needs to be conducted in order to determine what is needed for successful use of virtual worlds in learning games and simulations designed for youth.
In deciding the benefits and risks of virtual worlds in K through 12 education, it's important to actually understand what a virtual world is. A virtual world is a 3D multi-user environment with user-generated content. For the purpose of this literature review, it is online, computer-based, and browser-based virtual reality. It is often hosted on a grid or hypergrid, which is a company-owned or private server. There are three main types of virtual worlds that have been identified in my research. They include public, institutional, and private. With public worlds, the primary uses are networking and communication, adult role play, and education. With networking and communication, according to Hugh and Shung, one of the researchers, communication in a virtual world can take both verbal and nonverbal forms. Voice, avatar animations, and chat are the primary forms of communication in live world, while signs, note cards, video, music, websites, and links, animations, and visual display of objects are communications used on an individual basis, not related directly to live communication. For networking and communication, a lot of the research papers that I have been reading based their content on studies of teen Second Life. Age play, which means having a prepubescent avatar or child avatar, is a highly controversial subject due to social fears of sexual role play. This has resulted in a debate over unrealistic limitations placed on non-sexual role plays, since the ban of child avatars omit the reality of children in all social applications. Here is the online OS Grid application using Singularity Viewer. There are different viewer options for virtual worlds. Singularity, Firestorm. It's basically a choice of tool. Takes just a moment to load. I have teleported to Right Plaza, which is the Educator Commons on the OS Grid. The Educator Commons is one of the research resources that I found very useful, as this is a group of educators that share best practices and resources in open source grids. As you can see by this demonstration, the virtual world is very immersive. These are NPCs, which are non-player avatars. Kind of gives you an idea of what different avatars can look like. but also that you can have non-human avatars, either stationary or interactive within the virtual world as well. The Educator Commons has a resource room, which is up these stairs. And the different resources include educator blogs, where you can actually click and open the different blogs for best practices, resources, free downloads to put in the world, such as avatars, actual complete ORs or complete worlds already created, educational resources such as vocabulary cards, different examples. All of this is open source. You can also purchase as well, so there is a lot of opportunities. Just want to kind of give you an idea of the different options available. Now within the OS grid, there is actually hypergrid access, where you can access different worlds on private servers as well. Now, there's different ways you can actually go through individual links within the worlds. Oftentimes they'll have hyperpoints within worlds designed into them. There is also a hypergrid application, which let me go to now. Let me run so I can find it quicker. To kind of remember where things are when you're in the virtual world, they can be quite expansive. This is an example of where you can actually have your own private server on your own computer, and you can sign up for the hypergrid where you can actually allow other people to access your world. This is one of the welcome plazas. I teleport there. And as you can see, we have many people in this public space. These are examples of in-world grids that take you just to one place. If you walk over here, you'll see that this one, rather than giving you options and choices, takes you to the recreation plaza. A lot of information. So this is the terms for OS Grid. As you can see, they do have no child avatars. When you click on objects within the virtual world, it gives you more information. It will give you note cards, and it will also give you options to go to different web pages. Here it goes into more detail. Children and child avatars. No single issue has been as contentious or as difficult to address as the issue of children and child avatars in OS Grid. It is absolutely necessary for us to address the issue of child abuse and the appearance of child abuse from both a legal and moral standpoint. We believe that children, meaning people under the actual age of 18, belong on closed grids, monitored and controlled by parents or schools. Child avatars will not be allowed on official OS Grid plazas. We believe that child avatars are acceptable in role-playing on private regions where scenario is about community or family. We do not construe this narrowly. Don't worry, this policy is in no way applies to any role-playing involving adult avatars. We welcome furries, tinies, fairies, and all varieties and all of their variations. In official OS Grid plazas, we ask only that you behaviors stay within the region's rating. OS Grid staff will not be investigating private regions. We won't be searching your regions for violations. We will investigate or ask you personally if there is serious enough complaint. The policy you received today is not a final version. The intention is that to have a policy that works with the role-playing communities and does not interfere with them or limit their creative growth. So for open source grid, unless you have a private island, then you would not be able to have classrooms and students on the public grid itself. And you can keep that. Back in Dream World, which is located on my own private computer, this is a world I actually created in Kitely. As you can see, I have a completely different avatar here. The ground is white here because I actually downloaded this as an OR file. So once I created it online, I downloaded it, and I have not yet added the texture to the ground. In the online, the texture was already preloaded through the island purchase. So here I have created my own, this is actually my own created content, and this note card is the actual Kitely terms of service. They are unable to authorize legal access to children under the age of 13 without parental or legal custodial supervision. And they also have ratings and guidelines for avatars and for worlds, such as a general rating, a moderate rating, or an adult rating, which actually includes clothing coverage of the avatars, just like we saw in OS Grid, that doesn't allow intentional show of nudity. There is also the same guidelines and limitations within Kitely. And I use Firestorm to access Kitely.com and the actual virtual world that I created online. As you can see, I've changed my avatar again. Now, with some of the content that you can create yourself, I've done some editing, and I created this little officer who greets you upon entry. When you click on him, he actually states, "Keep it clean and fun, traveler. We're friendly here, and I don't want to have to bring the hammer down. I'll be watching you." That also pops up in chat. So again, as an NPC, you can program them to actually communicate in chat just as if it was a live person. So beyond networking and communication, public also is good for education, as I've demonstrated. With institutional, one technology companies, that's historically the first people to actually design virtual on-worlds. Now, with virtual on-worlds and technology companies, they usually use these for spatial studies and pre-commercial applications. With colleges and the research, I found that according to Hugh and Shung, most of the research on virtual worlds in education is based upon college level students. 69% of all research is college level. Only 19% of the research is based on secondary students' involvement in online virtual worlds, and only about 12% are based on primary grade students. When it comes to private worlds, of course, these are restricted or no access. This includes private islands on online grids controlled by island owners. Now, my online island in Kitely is a public island, so anyone can come there. If I was actually going to conduct a class environment, I would set that as a private island simply by using my controls, and then only allow students on the island. Private businesses and private educational institutions or home-based servers using the open source grid technology, such as Dreamworld, or again, if you access the hypergrid, those are no longer private, but you don't have to have the hypergrid tools on those private servers. Some other concerns with benefits and risks that I've identified through the research, and specifically what the researchers say, is the concern with security. Now, as I've shown, the ability to control a public space is identified as a primary barrier, primarily because of adult role play. However, this becomes more of a perceptual barrier since privacy and security controls, avatar ratings and restrictions, virtual world ratings, controls and restrictions in private spaces are all options currently offered in the virtual environment. So it becomes more of an educate the educator. A lot of the research papers I found were from uh, 2010, even 2016. A lot of the concerns that were addressed in those papers have since been rectified through a lot of the technology and a lot of the security applications being placed on, for instance, Kitely.com with all of their control options. And other, this is primarily negative perceptions from educators, accessibility and cost. Since the publication of several of the papers, like I said, in 2010, accessibility, such as Teen Second Life, which was identified by Michelle Dickey in her research as the most accessible platform of virtual world educational applications, uh, closed. And it has been replaced with Kitely.com as a very affordable and accessible option, as well as Dreamworld, which is the downloadable option on your own private server. When it comes to research, there is a significant gap between teachers' perception of the importance of integrating technology and their classroom use of these skills. Teachers feel that technology is very, very important, but they're not actually doing anything about it. The lack of technology skills is a primary factor of this. It's been identified as a primary barrier for educators themselves. The instructors actually do not have the technology skills. They're not comfortable with the technology, and they simply don't know how to use it, let alone teach it and integrate it into lesson plans. Now, compared with the often problematic adaptation to new technologies experienced by adults, the research has shown that children easily adapt to graphic and conceptual abstraction. They often have extensive experience in navigating 3D spaces and discovering and exercising interface affordances. So basically what Rousseau is saying is that our youth is very capable of using this technology, and it is actually very beneficial for them to learn in these environments. The cost of both procurement and maintenance of various sophisticated devices to create an immersive environment made mass use of the technology prohibitive. This is from Merchant, and again, this is a bit outdated simply because virtual reality and immersive environments, when you're thinking about Google Glasses and that type of technology, can be expensive. However, virtual worlds are computer-based and browser-based, and with current access to the internet being widespread and hypergrids becoming greater in numbers, this cost has been reduced. And by hypergrids, I mean Kitely.com. You can get a single island for $15 a month. You can get 4 islands for only $20 a month. So these are very cost-effective and accessible options. Time investment is another risk associated. The time it takes in building the environments, creating lesson plans, and implementation of lessons are actually a small part of the time investment concern. Getting absorbed in the entertainment aspect and the non-educational applications are cause for greater concern amongst educators, according to the research. Researchers found that teachers actually discussed going home at night after working within the virtual environment for the lesson plans and spending a couple hours just adjusting their avatar appearance. This goes along with the education versus entertainment concerns that the personalization features in virtual worlds may become more of a distraction to learners and ultimately outweigh the educational benefits. Positives are that the contemporary notion of learning environments recognizes that meaningful active learning takes place in complex multimodal environments in which the learner plays an active role in constructing knowledge. Research also shows that the 3D virtual worlds supported children's exploration of identity, community, and personal representation. Through the research, it's been indicated that technology can increase student motivation, attitude, engagement, and self-confidence, while improving organization and study skills. And I bring us back to the virtual world of Multiverse Dragon Masters on Kitely.com to discuss the findings of the research. Ultimately, from all of the research in this literature review, it is undeniable that there are educational benefits for youth in using online virtual worlds. Best practices would include ideally that the online virtual world environment be on private worlds or even better on private servers. Now with private servers, of course, we have the limitation of technology knowledge needing to educate the educators, um, even with the simplicity and of cost affordances associated with the minimal server use on personal computers, laptops, there is still that technology, content, and knowledge requirement. Now, with setups of open source and private islands on open public grids, that is also a very, very realistic option. To prevent the possible distraction in the entertainment versus education aspect, best practices would include one-on-one and group controlled interactions rather than simply creating a virtual environment and having the individual access it on their own. I'm going to continue to walk around and show you the different interactive features as you can view the resources used in this literature review.